shocking round of layoffs hit ESPN over the holiday weekend. 20 of the network's highest-profile on-air personalities getting the axe. Sort of rocked the sports media world. Many familiar faces lost their jobs, including lead NBA analyst Jeff Van Gundy, who spent nearly 2 decades with the network. He's called the NBA Finals for 16 consecutive years, widely considered the best TV analyst in basketball. ESPN opted over the weekend to let him go. Jalen Rose, also been a fixture of ESPN's basketball coverage. The former Pacers star has been the network's top studio host for 13 consecutive NBA Finals, dismissed. Other prominent figures to be sent packing include NFL Hall of Famer Steve Young, longtime SportsCenter anchor Neil Everett, ESPN mainstay Suzy Kolber, a fan favorite who was let go after 27 years at the network. What the heck is going on? Well, because everything these days has to be seen through a political lens. ESPN has become a lightning rod for many conservatives, some claiming vindication, like far-right commentator Charlie Kirk.
So what is driving this at ESPN? The answer is ESPN has gone woke, and it's just they're not as boundary pushing or as funny or as interesting as they used to be. This is happening because ESPN decided to go a political route.
Other right-wing outlets piled on as well. Too woke, so broke, said Sean Hannity's blog. Woke ESPN reportedly dumping 20 major on-air talents, wrote the Gateway Pundit. Other sites like Breitbart tied the ESPN layoffs to politics. Let's be clear. ESPN certainly has shown a leftward leaning in recent years. Earlier this year, the network honored transgender swimmer Leah Thomas during its celebration of Women's History Month. They were criticized by many on the right over their coverage of Colin Kaepernick. Their commentators frequently expressed left-leaning political opinions on air, on social media, and elsewhere. But those trying to say that the layoffs are a sign that ESPN is going down because of its politics are probably overlooking some big, expensive facts. ESPN has recently made some major acquisitions in the past few days. The network finalized a 6-year deal with the Big 12 Conference to broadcast its football and basketball games, reportedly forking over $1 billion to the conference, despite the fact that, by the way, the Big 12 now has no top college football attractions after powerhouse programs Texas and Oklahoma defected. Think about that. $1 billion to broadcast second-tier college football games. And on top of that, the network recently signed sports broadcasting superstar Pat McAfee to a blockbuster 5-year, $85 million contract, making him the highest-paid personality on ESPN, even ahead of ratings machine Stephen A. Smith. Those hardly seem like investments a dying media company would make. Instead, it seems more like ESPN's bean counters have made a decision to slash well-known vets with high salaries who may not necessarily move the ratings needle. But I don't know. Let's check in with Ryan Glasspiegel, sports reporter for the New York Post. He's been covering the latest at ESPN. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. All right, so what is going on here?
Well, so to your point, yeah, ESPN has certainly had some left-leaning viewpoints over the past several years, but the business factors that go into this layoffs, it really boils down to 1, cord cutting, and 2, rising rights fees. ESPN was in 100 million homes a decade ago. Now they're in about 70 million. They get $10 per month per subscriber to the cable and satellite bundle. 30 million times $10 a month times 12 months a year, that's several $1 billion a year in lost revenue. And at the same time, rights fees for the NFL have gone way up. They have a deal coming up with the NBA and UFC, and those rights are expected to rise. So they've got declining revenues and rising costs on their live sports, which is really the core of their business. And unfortunately, tentpole personalities that you mentioned had to bear the brunt of these business realities.
So how do they make an $85 million deal with Pat McAfee if that's the situation?
Yeah, well, they think that they can get a gambling presenting sponsor for him that's going to pay more than $17 million a year. He drove a lot of signups for FanDuel when they were the presenting sponsor of his show, and ESPN likely had at least a verbal agreement from another sports book to sponsor his show before they signed off on paying him that much money.
Stephen A. Smith on his podcast now saying that he might be swept up. Let's listen.
This ain't the end. More is coming. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, I could be next.
He's not going to be next.
No, he's not going to be next, but they also might not meet the price that he wants. So he might see it as, hey, I was the highest paid guy at the network before. Now you paid Joe Buck, Troy Aikman, and Pat McAfee more than me. They may not want to pay him more than they pay those guys. And he may have a business decision to make, whether it's cable news or working directly for a sports book or some combination of the two.
Interesting. Ryan Glasspiegel, thanks so much for coming on the program. Appreciate it. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.